Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Laura Kotti, and I am the Electronic Thesis and Dissertation Coordinator for the Graduate School. And what that means for all of you is that when you submit your thesis or your dissertation for the format check, I am the person who's going to be reviewing it for the format check. So anytime you have questions about your dissertation or formatting or anything of that realm, please contact me. What we're going to discuss today is go over all of the formatting requirements and a lot of the parameters that are in the graduate school about deadlines and details about embargoes, and just give you a full overview of the whole process. We'll have questions at the end, so you can hold off on that. If you do have something pop in your head, though, during the workshop, I'll be using PowerPoint. Please unmute yourself and just ask me. I can't see the chat when we're talking. After that, though, when I'm done speaking, then we will have a full Q&A. I will look at questions you have in your chat, or you can ask them by unmuting yourself, whatever you feel comfortable with. But without further ado, I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll get started. Okay, slideshow. All right, so as I said, my name is Laura Kotti, and I'm the ETD coordinator for the graduate school. And you're going to hear me using this expression ETD quite a bit, and what that stands for is Electronic Thesis and Dissertation. So don't be thrown off by that acronym. We use it a lot here. Here's an overview of what we'll be discussing today. The first thing we're going to talk about is something that I think is an important question, which is why formatting is important. Why do you need to do this? Then we're going to look at deadlines, and then we're going to discuss the format check process, which has some specifics that I think are important for you to know, especially if you're graduating this semester. After that, we're going to look at formatting requirements, then look at a document itself. Then we're going to look at some resources that we have on campus. I'll provide you with my contact information, and then I'll turn it over to you, and we'll ask questions. Just need a sip of water. Okay, so first up, why formatting is important. So one thing that's important is to know what formatting is and what it isn't. And so what formatting really does for you is its requirements for the structure of your document. So it doesn't really have anything to do with the content specifically, but more about the presentation of your content. So it gives you structure, it's all about style and consistency. And it's something that ensures that your document can be read easily, that it's accessible. And more important, it's also something that can make your document ready for publication. And that's essential because everything you could publish with, whether it's a journal, a book, even if you're applying for a grant, a fellowship, whatever, they're all going to have their own formatting requirements. So it's important for you to sort of begin paying attention to what entities require of you. So why do we do it? Well, like I said, it ensures readability because it makes sure that your document isn't messy. And I think this is very important, especially with the second point, which is that it makes your research the focus. And I stress this because you could have the most groundbreaking research possible in your dissertation. You could have cured cancer for all we know. But if your dissertation looks like a big fat mess, if you have strange margins on every page, if you're using 10 different kinds of fonts, if you're using a font that's very difficult to read, if your font size is too little, if your items that you list in your table of contents don't match what you've named them in your actual body of the document, then all of that messiness is going to obscure the very important research that you have in your document. And you don't want to do that, right? You want your research and all your hard work and all your intelligence that you put into it. That's what needs to shine. And really, formatting enables you to do that because it lets all that other pesky stuff just get out of the way. And when it's easier for people to read, then the thing they can focus on is your brilliance. And that's what we want, right? So in doing that, it makes your research the focus. It makes you the focus as a scholar, rather than, oh, what is all this strangeness I can't navigate? Also, it's good for accessibility purposes. And this is important as well, as we've learned with the pandemic. it's extremely important to have sort of visual accessibility, right, or digital accessibility. And by having your document formatted properly, you can also go in and put in the accessibility requirements so anybody can access your information. And as I stressed earlier, with scholarship and publishing, you know, if you submit to a journal or a book publication and you don't follow the strict rules they've laid out, they're not going to consider you. Grants? Nope, they will toss that. They are not going to consider you if you don't follow the rules. And so that's one of the things that you can sort of learn through this process with formatting your dissertation or your thesis. And the last point with reputation, I think is important to stress, because if your document is kind of on the messy side and it's difficult to parse out, and other people in your department have this problem, that's going to reflect poorly on you, first of all, as a writer and as a researcher, but it's also going to reflect poorly on your committee and your major professor. It's not going to make your department look too good, and it's not going to make your university look too good either. So you've got these tangential ripple effects that happen from that. So formatting is very important. We do it for a reason. This is not just to torture you at the end of the semester. It's to make sure that your document, it looks as polished and professional as possible so that you and your research are all going to be taken seriously. One document that the graduate school provides is the format guide, and I updated it this summer, so it's all up to date with a lot of our requirements and with some information you can find on there. You can access it on that link, and you can also go to the graduate school's website, specifically the thesis and dissertation page, which I will happily show you after we're done with this PowerPoint. This format guide is very interactive, so you can, as you can see from the table of contents listed there, all the items are laid out, and what you can do is just click on them, and then there's a little box at the bottom of every page that says contents, and you can just click on that and it'll take you back to the table of contents. And that way it's just easier to access on your computer. I personally don't like to scroll through things, so I just tried to make it easier. But again, this has all of the information about every formatting thing and everything we're talking about today. In fact, it has even more information. So do look at that and use that as your resource as you are formatting your dissertation. So deadlines, this is extremely important. So there are two main submission deadlines you need to pay attention to during the semester in which you graduate. So if you're not going to be graduating this semester, these don't pertain to you, but when you do graduate, they will. So the first deadline you'll have to meet is called the format check deadline, and sometimes we're in the process of possibly changing the name to the preliminary format check deadline. And what that means is that date is earlier in the semester. It just refers to your initial submission, and you can change the content and the format after that deadline. So first of all, you can submit way before that deadline if you wish. That's totally possible. In fact, I recommend that. The sooner you get it to me, the sooner I can get it back to you. And it's also important to know that with the format check deadline, your document does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be at the committee approved, ready to go level. It just needs to have some content. And what we're looking for is just sort of the basic, at least the bare minimum required parts, which again, this is also in the format guide, and we'll have it on another slide, but the bare minimum would be a title page, your abstract, table of contents, some kind of content itself, so at least a chapter, or chapters, and then a bibliography. So as long as you have those parts, even if they're not totally finished and they're not exactly where you want them to be, that's okay. And in fact, I've often encouraged students who, if they're just really trying to get something done, but they've got a lot going on in their lives and they want to meet that deadline, and are concerned that, well, I haven't written my abstract yet. You can do something. I recommend just give us I call it a placeholder page, where you can have a page and just put maybe in red font something like, this is a work in progress, or will be done. And I will know that when I'm looking at it. I'm just looking at formatting. So the goal with the format check deadline is for you to get a handle on the formatting earlier in the process. And that way, when you are in the throes of really finalizing that writing and adding in any changes that your committee require after the defense, then it's not going to be quite so stressful, because you'll have already got the formatting and those pesky margins and everything. It'll be done, so you don't have to worry about that. So that's what we're doing now. So format check deadline, it is required. You have to meet that, but the document itself does not have to be perfect for that one. Now, with the other deadline, the final submission deadline, this one's later in the semester, and this is your final submission. So this one, yeah, it needs to be perfect. This one needs to have the final approved content. This one needs to be ready to go. So final submission deadline, that's the one that is, well, although they're both required, that one's a little bit more pressing in the sense that you do need to have everything perfect back then. Format check deadline, don't worry about that. I mean, get it done, like submit something to me, but don't stress too much about the perfection of it. You do with the final deadline. If you're graduating this spring, these dates pertain to you. So if you're graduating in the summer, fall, next year, whatever, don't worry about this. But if you're graduating in May of 2022, here are the deadlines for this semester. So March 1st is the format check deadline. That is fast approaching. So if you're graduating this semester and you haven't submitted anything to me yet, you do need to go ahead and get something in. And as we've stressed, it doesn't have to be perfect at this point. It just needs to be something. Don't send just one chapter, so it's got to be more than that, but have your essential parts and submit that. The defense deadline is March 21st, and then the final submission deadline is April 4th. So these are all dates for you to know. They're up on our website if you forget them. And I also want to say that after today's workshop, I will be emailing you these slides, so you will have them for your own records after today. So let's take a look at the format check process. So with your first submission, what you're going to do is create your ETD account. And that's with the ETD administrator. You can go to that link there. It'll take you directly to it. Or you can also access that link from the graduate school's website if you go to the thesis and dissertation page. When you create your account, they're going to prompt you for not one, but 2 email addresses. And this is very important. You are required under the school email to use your U of SC email address. We have instituted this policy due to some issues with communication over the past year where sometimes the firewall for Gmail or Yahoo is too strong and some people couldn't get their comments. So you have to use your USC email address for that one. However, you also, in addition to that, have to include your personal email address. So that can be your Gmail, Hotmail, whatever. And that's for long-term communication with ProQuest. So if you're seeking an embargo, for example, and you're going to want to renew that in a year, 2 years, whatever, then that's what they're going to use that for contact for. However, with contact with me, you will be using your USC email address. So that will be where I'll send you the format check. I'll send you the email saying you've passed, whatever. That'll be with your USC email. Step 3, this is important. So you are not at all required to file for copyright, to order a hard copy. Those things are optional. It's entirely up to you. However, if you want to do those things, you need to do that when you create your account. And there seems to be, I think there's this idea that, oh, I don't want to order a hard copy now because this is my first draft and I don't want that one to be my hard copy. I want my perfect one to be my hard copy. That's okay. Because when you set up your account, the first submission that you make is not going to be the one that's published. So if you want a hard copy, go ahead and order it now. And the one that passes the format check and that meets all the requirements, that's the one that you're going to receive as a hard copy. I mean, in theory, you can always do this later after you pass the format check, but it's much more difficult to do that because you're going to have to retroactively, you have to contact ProQuest directly, and they will have to go into your account and change, So it's a lot more work that you probably don't need on your plate. So if you want a hard copy, just order it when you set up your account. Okay, next. So you can enter your ETD information, and that needs to match what's on your GDSF or GTSF. And the GDSF and GTSF, those are forms that you fill out for either a dissertation or thesis, respectively, when you're graduating. And so that will have information like the names of your major professor and your committee members, the title of your dissertation, whether or not you want an embargo, all that stuff will be on there. And your ETD information needs to match across several platforms. So it needs to match what's on your DSF or TSF. what's on the title page of your document, and also what you put in your account. So your title has to be the exact same, and that's really so we can match all these things together. And the same thing goes for your name. It needs to match what we have in the university records. And I am very aware that oftentimes, with things with life, that your name may change. And if that is the case, you can always contact the registrar. They have a name form, a name change form you can fill out. So, for instance, if a woman has gotten married and has changed her last name, she can fill out that form. So we take that seriously. So don't feel like, oh no, I can't have my new name on there. No, you can. It's just there's a process for that. And if you are having any trouble with it, please contact me and I'll help you as best I can. Graduation information. This is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, but for your graduation month, please just put May, August, or December. Please don't put something like February. We don't have a February graduation. We do not have an October graduation. So please, one of those 3 months, you will be cleared either in May, August, or December. That's it. And that's actually important on my end because of data that I have to collect. So if you put that you graduate in March, it's going to be a bit difficult to track, and we don't want to have that problem. So make sure you put the correct month that you'll be graduating in. And if something happens where it turns out you were going to graduate in May, but something came up and you'll have to graduate in August, then you can just go in your account and change that. Or worst case scenario, just talk to me. Then lastly, this might sound very intuitive, but sometimes things happen and people don't do this, but please make sure that you click submit. If you don't click submit, I don't get any of this information. I don't even know that you've created an account. I get nothing. So you have to do that. It's very important. So here's how the format check process works in general. You are going to click submit. That's important. And then the ETD coordinator, that's me, I will receive notification that, so-and-so has submitted this thesis or this dissertation. And it's important for y'all to know that I do review everything in the order it's received. So if you send me something on Friday, all the stuff that was sent earlier this week will have to come before that. And then I might get to yours. But as soon as I get to yours, I will review the document. I'll put comments on it. I use Adobe Acrobat Pro, so you'll get the PDF that when I send you feedback, you'll get a PDF that has comments written throughout it. Explaining what you need to fix, and you can just use those as feedback. So I don't go in and change things. I just add comments. Now, this is a very important distinction I just want y'all to be aware of. Major revisions versus minor revisions. So when you receive feedback from me, there's either going to be a request for major revisions or a request for minor revisions. First and foremost, these two distinctions, neither of them have any they are in no way a reflection of your writing abilities or the research or the quality of your work. Not at all. This is 100% only about formatting. So if you've worked very, very hard on your thesis and you get a request for major revisions, that does not mean that your research was bad or that you failed in some way. No, it just means you've got more formatting things to fix. And more specifically, the distinction between major and minor is important to note as well. So major revisions means that you've got either plentiful errors, there's just something wrong on almost every page, and it also means that these errors affect more than 1/3 of the ETD, and they can or cannot be connected. So an example of a document that may need major revisions would be, let's say that your dissertation is 300 pages long, and by accident, every single page of this 300-page dissertation has a 2-inch top margin. What that means is you're going to have to go back on all the pages that need to have 1-inch top margins, which would be the vast majority of that document, and fix that. That's going to have to deal with section breaks and margin changes. Then after you make that change, that's probably going to disrupt the placement of a lot of the content. So you're going to have to go into your table of contents and change what page each of the chapters now begin on. And then on top of that, it can also impact the placement of all your tables and figures. So that is a lot of work to have to do. Likewise, if you had, say, your side margins, you had them at 1 inch, not 1.25, that's a lot of work to change. So that in no way means that the document itself was of poor quality. It just means, oh, you got a lot of stuff that you got to some changes to pay attention to. So that's what an example of major revisions. Minor revisions, that's stuff that's more easily fixed. These errors are not necessarily linked, and it affects less than a third of your document. So an example would be, let's say that your title page has got some errors on it, and you have some issues with your table of contents, but after that, for the most part, it's smooth sailing. You've just got an error or two here and there. That would be minor revisions. So some stuff to work on, but it's not like especially time consuming. And really look at it that way. Major revisions versus minor revisions is more of a measurement of how much time you're going to have to spend revising things. So continuing with this format check process, after you get the feedback and after you make all of the changes that you need to, you will log into the same account. Do not create a new one. Just go into the same account, and then you'll submit your revisions. Make sure you click Submit Revisions, and we'll just go through this process until you pass. And some students have asked me in the past, oh, is there a limit to how many times we can submit? Like, oh no, if I get a request for revisions a second time, does that mean I can't graduate? No, there is no limit. I mean, please don't, you don't want to submit like 30 times. Like that's gonna be a little rough, but no, if you need to go through a couple of rounds, that's okay. That's totally normal. Case in point, who went through multiple rounds? I did when I did my master's thesis. So it's okay. It happens to the best of us. So just note that this is all to help you. And this is also really in service to your document and to your research to make sure it's all polished and it all looks good. So we all have the same goal. So after you pass the format check, so first things first, you will receive a notification email from me. And yes, this will go to your U of SC email address. This will not go to your Gmail. This will go to your USC email. And we have two different stages of approval. You don't necessarily have to meet both of these. This is more of a distinction depending on at what point of the semester you pass the format check. So there is something called preliminary format approval. And what this means is that you have passed the format check before the final deadline. So that means that you've met all the formatting requirements. You have at least the required parts. I should have put title page there, I apologize, but your title page, abstract, table of contents, chapters, references, and if it's needed, an appendix. And with all of that, if after you pass the format check, even if it's before that final deadline, so your final format approval, that means that you do have the ability to change content. So you'll have to email me and let me know, oh, it's good to go, it's perfect, or I'm expecting to make some changes, I don't think it's ready yet. So what that means is if you get preliminary format approval and you know that you're going to make changes later, I'll put a note in your account saying, the version from such and such date has met all requirements. And then after that, we'll just sort of leave your account alone, and then you'll resubmit when it's all perfect. And then we'll just look at it again. And usually people who meet preliminary format approval don't need to make a whole lot of changes when they submit their final one. So it's a good thing to get the approval early because it's just sort of a load off, Now, that being said, there is something called final submission approval. So this is when you pass the format check after the final deadline. So after that, you can't be like, oh, I don't really like the way I wrote chapter 3. I want to redo the conclusion there. Nope, that's too bad. Final deadline, we done. So it's over. That's the one that's going, ready or not. So after you you have the final submission approval, you can't change the content. It's done. And everything has to be finalized and approved by your committee. Your grammar has to be good. It's got to be all ready. So that's what that means. So you don't necessarily have to have preliminary format approval before the final one, but you have to get at least the final approval. That's for everybody. Sorry. So after you pass the format check, I will add a note to your account. Your coordinator at the graduate school will then be assigned to your account, so you and I will part ways. So you will deal with him or her as far as any questions about your transcript or program of study, graduation status, all that. I don't handle any of that stuff. That is something for your coordinator. I just do theses and dissertations. And please note that this process to review all of your graduation material can take several weeks. So do not panic if you pass the format check on a Tuesday and then by Thursday it still says submission and review. That's all right. you're doing just fine. It just means that your coordinator is reviewing everything. So embargoes, I wanted to touch on this because I get a lot of questions about it, and this is, I think, an important part of academic publishing. So what an embargo does is it prevents your work from being published in databases. So this is a useful tool if you are, let's say, seeking a patent, if you're trying to publish your dissertation as a book, or you're trying to publish parts of your dissertation, in journals, then a lot of times with publications, they will want you to have your work under embargo, just to make sure that it's, not out there for free. They want to make sure that it's sort of sealed. And moreover, if you have some really, really culturally sensitive or, time sensitive or just some really groundbreaking research you're trying to work with and you're not quite done yet or whatever, that's what an embargo is for. So it keeps people from being able to access it. You can choose one of 3 lengths. You can either choose 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years. Each one's beneficial in its own way. I will say if you have not started looking for a publisher yet and you want to publish, some of your manuscripts in your document in journals or something, go with at least 1 year, probably 2 years if you haven't started. 6 months, that's more for someone who's already got like the publishing stuff ready. 6 months, as y'all know from being in academia for so long, is a very short period of time. Now that being said, you can renew your embargo, for any one of the 3 lengths, so you're not locked in. So if you chose 1 year the first time and you're like, oh, I just need a little bit more time, I want to do 6 months, that's cool. Or if you did 6 months and you're like, okay, this is taking way longer, I want 2 years, that's fine. What you'll have to do is contact me at least a month in advance and let me know, hey, I want to renew my embargo. We can do this, renew it up to 10 years cumulatively. We cannot embargo your work permanently because we're a public institution. And the 2 places where it will all be published is in Scholar Commons, which is the university repository, and also in ProQuest, which is the company that owns ETD Administrator. So it will be in their databases as well. If you are seeking an embargo, just select the length that you prefer on your DSF or your TSF. And then in addition to that, you need to send a memo to the graduate school. And so this memo doesn't have to be really long, but it needs some kind of justification for it. So letting us know that you're seeking publication, you've got a patent, whatever the reason is, the length that you prefer, the title of your document, and of course your information. And most important, the memo needs to be signed by either your major professor or head of department, or both. Both is fine. But we need to see evidence that your department and your committee, endorse this decision. So yeah, it's pretty easy, but the letter is very important, and selecting it on the DSF. More important, I forgot to add that with ProQuest, you will need to, in your ETD account, select the embargo link there as well. They call it a delayed release. But if you're having any trouble with setting up your account or anything, you can always give me a call, email, whatever. I'll help you as best I can. All right, so now we're in the real nitty-gritty, formatting requirements. Oh, excuse me. So first of all, here are the required sections. This is stuff that you must have in your document. You have to have a title page. That's non-negotiable. You have to have an abstract. You have to have a table of contents. List of tables, list of figures, I'll discuss in a second, but you have to have chapters, and you've got to have some kind of bibliography. Now, with list of tables and list of figures, the reason those 2 have asterisks next to them is it sort of depends. If you have at least 4 tables or you have at least 4 figures, then you are required to have a list of tables and or list of figures. Now, if you just have 1 table in your document, you don't necessarily have to have a list of tables. That's optional at that point. You can if you want to. Some students want to, some just don't want to fiddle with that, and that's totally fine. But 4 or more, it's required. Here are your optional sections. So there's a copyright page, dedication, acknowledgments, a preface, list of symbols, list of abbreviations, some kind of foreword or introduction, an appendix or appendices. These are all optional. And oftentimes what is considered necessary, not required, but necessary, or important in a dissertation is going to be very discipline specific. So for example, I know oftentimes with education, they expect you to have a number of appendices in the back documenting, research steps and assignments or something. Sometimes with music, they expect you to have an appendix. List of abbreviations. A lot of times with STEM fields, they'll want that. Nursing definitely has abbreviations. But those aren't required by the graduate school. But that's all some stuff that you want to talk about with your committee about, oh, I don't know if I should have an appendix or not. Then just talk to your committee, but they're optional. So margins, everyone's favorite part. Let's look at this. So in portrait orientation, the left and right margins will always be 1.25 inches. That's set, standards, what they have to be. Now the bottom margin will always be 1 inch. So those, left and right and the bottom, those are always set. It's the top margins that can vary depending on the content of the page. So on the very first page of a major section, or a page that has a major heading, which we'll look at major headings in a minute, but a page with a major heading, it has a 2-inch top margin. And then all the rest of the pages of that chapter or section are going to have 1-inch top margins. And this is really just to delineate the beginning of a new section. It's kind of like when you're reading a book, the first page of a chapter is going to have some kind of indentation or, top margin to indicate that it is indeed first page of a chapter. And then the rest of the pages, have a 1-inch top margin. So we're going to look at an example of that, but that is what that means. So think of your dissertation like a book in that respect. So here's an example. So we see on the left, mouse. So here we are, first page of the chapter 1 introduction. Top margin is 2 inches. Left and right is 1.25. Bottom is 1 inch. Then if we look at the second page of this chapter, the top margin is now 1 inch. Left and right is 1.25, and the bottom is 1 inch. We had a virtual workshop yesterday on the Word template, and we're in the process of putting the video of that workshop on the website. In addition, there are going to be 2 in-person versions of that. So if you're kind of like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do that, that's okay. You can please feel free to come to one of our Word template workshops. If you're using Microsoft Word. If you're using LaTeX, you want to talk to Dr. McNulty or use the instructions we have for that. So that's a little bit different. Anyway, that is how it should look. So landscape orientation. First of all, it's important to know when you would use landscape. So that's when you have the portrait page rotated. And you would use that if you have content that's not going to fit on a traditional portrait page. So if you have a really big figure, like a really wide table, really wide figure, that's what a landscape orientation is for. So the left and the right margins are always going to be 1 inch, and the top and the bottom are going to be 1.25. So this is how it looks. So note it's basically the same page, just rotated. So top and bottom 1.25, left and right 1 inch. And with this, note that this does have a major figure, or excuse me, major heading, major heading here, but it still has 1.25, and that's because on a landscape page, it's just a little too tricky, I think, to have like the 2 inches on one side and whatever. So just with the major heading rule, the one exception would be a landscape page. And really, that's only going to happen probably in an appendix, so it's pretty unusual. But note, this table is very wide, so this would not fit on a traditional portrait page. That's why it's on a landscape one. Likewise, this figure is really big. And note where the figure caption is down here, and then the table title, it's above the table, where those are placed. And we'll look at that again in more detail momentarily. But that is how a landscape page looks. So page numbers on the portrait page, it's going to be on the centered and on the bottom of the page and 1/2 inch from the bottom. Landscape, it's technically in the same place, but the page is, turned. So centered, and it'll be along the left edge and 1/2 inch from the edge of the page. Now the format guide, if you go down to the useful tips section, which again, I'll show you during our Q&A, does have tips and steps for you to follow in putting in page numbers on a landscape page, because that's not intuitive because Microsoft Word is Microsoft Word, but we do have steps for that outlined for you. So page numbers for your front matter. Now, first of all, it's important to define what front matter means. So front matter is all of this stuff over here on the left side here, just all the preliminary things. So your copyright page, dedication, table of contents, list of abbreviations, all of that stuff's front matter. And with your front matter, you're going to use lowercase Roman numerals. And please note that the title page has no page number. It still, quote unquote, counts in the pagination sequence, but it does not have a page number. And, you know, the page number will be like 2, 3, 4, etc. So lowercase, so no uppercase Roman numerals, just lowercase Roman numerals. For the body of your document, note that with the very first page of either your first chapter or your introduction, whichever comes first, that the pagination sequence will start over and continue for the rest of your document, but it'll be in Arabic numbers. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. So that's very important. And again, there's some examples. We also have a sample on the graduate school's website. There's sample dissertations and sample theses, both with and without notes, that you can take a look at if you want to see what it looks like formatted. All right, so tables and figures, the placement of them. So note, we have 3 options here, but you can only choose one. So one option for all placement of all tables and figures. So the first option is you can embed it in the text. You do not use text wrapping, so the text will be above and below. That's it, no matter how teeny the figure or table is. This is an option. I think it's better if you have a few small ones. If you have lots and lots and lots of figures, it might be kind of tricky because you're going to be dealing with placing with the text, and then if you have to change your text, and you're going to have to go in and move it around. So you can do that if you wish, but just bear in mind that's going to be a little bit more extra work. Another option is you can place it on a separate page on the page right after you mention it. And we're going to look at samples in a minute, but this just means, first of all, you don't leave any extra space on that page, you know, preceding the figure. It should just run continuously to the end, and then you have your page with just the figure or the table there. This one's good if you have a lot of big figures, and I think it gives it sort of a clean look, but you're not required to use that one. It's just one of the options. And then the third option is you can just put all the tables and all the figures at the end of that chapter. So each chapter, not the end of the document, but just the end of that chapter. They can be placed consecutively, you know, and you can either do all the tables first, then all the figures, or just one at a time in order they're mentioned. Doesn't matter. Either way, as long as it's a sensible order, that's fine. That's a good option if you have lots of figures and lots of tables and you just are very, you're not looking forward to fitting all those in, then that's a good one to use. I think that's a good option. It's just, it's a little bit easier on you. But again, it just depends on what you want to do. So let's look at these. So here's what it looks like embedded in the text. So we've got writing up here, we mention it, got the figure caption is below the figure, and then we keep going with the text. So this is a good one if you have some little figures. If you got bigger stuff, it might get tricky. Now here's how it looks on a separate page. So note that the text on this page goes all the way to the end. Even if we mention it up here, doesn't matter. You keep adding text to fill up this page. You don't leave lots of space. And then we see the next page just has the figure. And what would happen is on the page following the page with the figure, you would just pick up again where the text here at the end of this page, we just continue on the page after the figure. So this gives it, I think, sort of a clean look if you have really big figures, but again, it's not required. You just have to pick one though. And then the last one is just having them all at the end of the table, goodness, end of the chapter. So we got our conclusion here, chapters over, and then tables and figures, table 1.1, figure 1.1, and then it would just continue. So there's pros and cons to each one, but the most important thing is that you choose one option for the placement of all tables and all figures in the whole document. So if you decide to embed them in chapter 1, then you're going to have to embed them for all of the rest of the chapters. So you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to embed the figures and tables in the first chapter, but in the next chapter, I'm going to put them all at the end of chapter 2. No, you can't do that. You choose one method for everything. So I say just sort of think about what would be easiest on you and sort of give you the fewest headaches. And what would, I think, also best serve the presentation of all your information and all your data. So things to consider. If you're not sure what to do and you're sort of feeling anxious about choosing one, you were always welcome to contact me and sort of just get my 2 cents, and I'm happy to help you out with that. So numbering your tables and figures. You will use a unique number for each table and each figure. And the way this works is, and these are the graduate school specific requirements. So one thing to note is if you are using manuscript style, where you have a manuscript in your document and the journal that you published in had their own sort of numbering thing going on that you had to follow, forget about that. You have to follow what the graduate school requires. So keep that in mind. So it will begin with either the word figure or table, depending on which type it is. Then you're going to follow with the chapter number or appendix letter, then a period, then the number of the figure or the table. And you only number them within a chapter or appendix. So the numbering starts over with each chapter and, if applicable, each appendix. So here's some examples. Oh my goodness, I placed that wrong place. So we'll look at the equation one in a minute. Sorry about that. So with chapter 1, for example, you have some tables and figures there. It'll be table 1.1. Then the second table will be table 1.2. And then the first figure will be figure 1.1. First figure will be figure 1.2. And likewise here. So note there are 3 tables in chapter 2. It's 1 figure. So appendix A has 2 of each. And note that with appendix B, see how the table number or letter, quote unquote, begins with a B. It's not A for all of the appendices. So you don't do A for appendix. No, it's the letter of the appendix. So appendix B, it'll be table B.1, figure B.1. And a student asked me once during one of these workshops if, say, the table is placed, if you've numbered your headings in your chapter, and let's say in heading 1.3, that's where you have your very first table. Does that mean it's table 1.3? The answer is no. Excuse me, that's still table 1.1 because it's the table, it's in chapter 1 and it's the first table in chapter 1, so 1.1. So that's how you number it. And this is also explained in the format guide. So here's some examples. So note that in addition to your figure number, there we go, you'll have to add some kind of caption or table to your figure or table number. And table titles, you need to keep that sort of short and sweet. With figure captions, it can be a little bit longer. So note also with the figure caption here that it is aligned with the left side of the figure, okay? And it's about the width of the figure, and note that it is single spaced. So don't double space it, don't do some weird tab thing. No, just keep it with that. Now that being said, if you've got a figure and then your caption is super long, I know sometimes, especially in the STEM fields, they'll have you add lots and lots of notes, and it's going to take like half a page for you to describe that figure. It's okay if it goes wider. If you ever have any concerns or questions with that, ask me. Likewise with the table title, note table titles go above tables. So figure captions go below, table titles go above, and it's table 3.1. We've got our short and sweet phrase there. If you want to add notes to your table, you can always just put note underneath the table and then just add whatever details you want underneath it. But this is how it should look. Okay, back here. So equations. I have gotten some questions about, well, in the STEM, how should I number this? First of all, we don't really have any official requirements for how you display equations or formulas or anything. You have at it with that. The only thing that we do require is, like all content, it's got to fit within the margins. So something to look at. LaTeX is really good if you're doing a math dissertation or a physics dissertation, something with lots of equations and things, because it can fit stuff in there way better than in Word. Word's good if you're typing with, words. So if you're in liberal arts, Word's going to be the best one for you, sadly. But LaTeX is better if you're doing more math, sciencey stuff. So there are some options. You have the freedom, if you wish, to number your equations. That is not at all required, though. You also have the option, if you want to have some kind of list of equations or list of schemes. Totally cool. I have seen that in some chemistry ones. But it's not required. So it really just depends on what you want to do and what's going to serve you best. So no, a list of equations is not required. You don't have to do that. But if that helps you refer to them, so here's an example. I am an English major, so I have been, I'm not the best with all of this, so I just thought, okay, Pythagorean theorem. So here's an example. So we have our equation, and it's numbered there. So if you want to do that, like to refer back to your equation, that's fine, but we don't really have any requirements other than it's got to fit in the margins. So Other than that, it really just depends on what best serves you. Okay, what best serves your data, what's going to best serve your narrative in your writing. That's what you want to think about. If you're ever feeling, sort of like, oh, I'm not sure what to do with the equations, just call me. I will help you as best I can. Okay, so font. Let's take a look at this. So first of all, for the body of your documents, all your paragraphs, it needs to be 12 point. There are different fonts you can use, which we'll look at in a second, but it needs to be size 12. Headings, however, you can have a little bit of fun with this. It can either be size 12, just to keep it simple, or if you want to make it a little bigger and make it size 14 for your headings, that's cool. That's fine. What you don't want is to make it size 36, okay, or to make it a size 8. We want it to be 12 or 14 for headings, and then only 12 for the body of your document. Now, the text within your tables, not the table title, but in your tables, so the data in your tables, that can be as small as size 10 if you need to make it, to shrink it a little bit to make sure everything fits. You don't want to, you cannot go smaller than 10. You can't make it a size 7. No one can read that, but 10 to 12. You can make it 11 if you want to. So you do have that option. And then whatever font you choose, you just use that one font for all text. So that means page numbers, your writing, like in your body of your document, stuff in your tables, your table titles, your figure captions, your references. Everything has to be in that one font. But there are other fonts you can choose. So if you don't like Times New Roman, you are not beholden to use Times New Roman. That's totally fine. I don't really love that font either. So you don't have to choose that one. But these are the ones you can choose. You can do Arial, you can do Calibri, Courier New, you can do Palatino, you can do Tahoma or Times New Roman. Any one of those fonts is fine, but again, what's the key? Just one. So just pick one. And I'm pretty good at being able to tell. So if you write in Arial, but you've got your page numbers in Calibri, I can tell that. So don't do that. Okay, so headings versus major headings. It's important to know what these mean, I think, going forward. So major headings means like your major sections. So a major heading, an example would be abstract. Dedication is a major heading. Table of contents is a major heading. Chapter 1, introduction, that's a major heading. References is a major heading. So those big titles on the first page of those sections, that's a major heading. Other than that, you can have like subheadings or just regular headings or chapter headings. And that's going to be what's within your chapter. So if you've got chapter 1 is your, or chapter 2, let's say, is your literature review, and then you have your heading 2.1 introduction, that's a heading. So that's within the chapter. The only requirements we have with your headings and major headings really is just consistency. So if you want to put your chapter titles in all caps, bold and centered, you do that for dedication, then you're going to have to do that for all of your major headings. So you can't like be like, well, I'm going to put my chapter titles in italics and my appendix titles underlined. No, you can't do that. Just one style. As far as what that style is, it's up to you. You can have a little fun with it. It has to be size 12 or 14, and you do have the option to number headings within a chapter, but again, that's not required. That's your choice. I don't care. The only requirement as far as the numbering goes is that you're consistent, right? So if you want to number your headings in one chapter, but you don't do that in another chapter, that's when we have a problem. So just pick one. All right, so let's look at a complete document. So here's an example of a title page for a dissertation. So notice that all of the text is not only centered horizontally, but also vertically, okay? So we have an equal amount of space above and an equal amount of space below. So it makes it look nice and clean. So you want to make sure that. Now, I'm not going to be like pulling out a ruler and be like, oh my goodness, this has 0.2 of an inch of a space more on the bottom than on the top. No, you just want it to make sure it looks tidy like this does. All the text in red is obviously stuff that you can change that will be specific to you. So full name here, and then previous degrees go above this line, get your horizontal line, and then all this other stuff down here pertains specifically to the degree you were writing the dissertation for. You get your committee names right here, and notice that there's no professor or doctor. You don't do that. And then we have Dr. Weldon at the bottom, who's our dean of the graduate school. And importantly, no page number. Okay, so a thesis title page. So again, very similar. So equal amount of space above and below. But notice the one big change is that the way that you label your head professor is with a thesis, it's director of thesis or reader, okay, for the second reader. You don't put major professor for a thesis. So notice with the dissertation, major professor, committee member, the thesis, it's director of thesis and reader. So keep that in mind. So a thesis is for a master's degree, dissertation is for a doctoral degree. And the format guide goes into detail about this as well. So the copyright page. So note that we've got our page number down here. And this is optional. I do encourage students to do this though, just out of some self-protection, just to make sure you've got that labeled like, hey, my work's copyrighted. Your full name, notice the name here has to match what's on the title page. You've got the year of graduation is going to be your copyright year, and you write all rights reserved. And it's 2 inches-ish from the bottom of the page. So you don't want to have it at the top, for example, just closer to the bottom. So your dedication, acknowledgments, and abstract. So dedication and acknowledgments are optional. Typically, they only go for 1 page, but I don't care that much. I mean, if you want to take a little longer to thank everybody who's helped you get your doctorate, that is totally fine. I'm going to be paying attention more to the formatting. So are your margins done correctly? Are you using the major heading in the same style for acknowledgments that you did for dedication and as you do for the other things? That's what I'm looking for. So these 2 are optional, but you can do whatever you want there. Abstract, however, is required. And note how with all 3 of these things, the major headings all look exactly the same, all formatted. So they're just centered in all caps. That's one option. That's not the only option you have as far as formatting, but you got to be consistent. And likewise with abstract, typically they're only about 350 words, but I know some disciplines require you to write more. So as long as it's not like long enough to be a chapter, I think we're fine. So table of contents. Again, this is a major heading, so it's got the same style there. So we're going to look at 2 samples here. So with this one, we've got dedication, acknowledgments, abstract, all that stuff. We've got our chapter 1 is called Introduction. Okay, and notice it starts on page 1. We've got chapter 2, and notice we have subheadings listed here. And notice there's also only 1 level of subdivision. Now, obviously, in your chapter itself, you can have, section 2.2.2.2, but you can't list that in the table of contents, just 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, etc. And likewise with chapter 3, because this one also has subheadings, those are listed, and you listed them for chapter 2, you got to list them for chapter 3 as well. And notice chapter 4 is called Conclusion, then we got the bibliography. Another way you can do table of contents. So we've got, dedication, abstract, list of tables, all that good stuff. But note, introduction is just called introduction. Conclusion is just called conclusion. Okay? That is one option as well. So you don't necessarily have to make your introduction have a chapter title. It can just be an introduction or just be a conclusion. The key I'm looking for here is symmetry. So if you just don't give them chapter numbers for one, then don't do it for the other. Opposite's true here. And note also with chapter 1 to chapter 2, there are no subheadings listed. So you are not at all required to list subheadings. If that's just too much work for you and you just don't want to do it, don't worry about it. However, if you feel like it would really benefit the reader for them to know where all these subheadings are, then include them. It's entirely up to you. And notice there's Appendix A, Appendix B, so it lists everything here, except the copyright page you don't list, and you don't list the table of contents in the table of contents. So list of figures and list of tables. These are going to be done in the same way. So notice with this example, there's 4 of them. Okay, so with 4 or more, right, you got to have a list of tables. And so note also, and this is also true for the table of contents, you see how this title is split in half. It doesn't run all the way to the end over the page number. We don't do that. You want to split it early, and then the second or subsequent lines of the title are all indented. So we did the same thing here. This is indented, cut off early. Same thing with list of tables and list of figures. So that's to keep it readable, keep the page numbers easier to read, and it just gives it sort of a more clean look overall. So here's how your chapter 1 looks. And again, this link will take you to the graduate school's website where you can access any samples if you want to take a look at those. But note, first page of chapter 1, 2-inch top margin. Second page of chapter 1, 1-inch top margin. And notice the page numbers down here. Okay, so the first page of the introduction is 1, then 2, it goes on and on. Likewise down here, Roman numeral. Lastly, references. So these are going to have to be in some kind of order. Alphabetic order is usually a good way to go with your final bibliography, but I know some disciplines, they want you to have it sort of in the order that appears, and you can just number those to give it some sense of order. Otherwise, it's just going to look like chaos. But it needs to be ordered in some way. And then note that the appendix comes after the bibliography. Okay? Some resources. On campus, you can obviously access the graduate school's website, which has a lot of information there, including all the templates, format guide, other workshops if you want to attend something else. That's all there. The Writing Center is a really good resource. That's with the English department. You can do follow this link to go there. You can set up an appointment, and they can help you with any stage of the writing process. So even if you're like, I've got this idea, and this goes also for papers, not just your dissertation, but if you're like, oh, I've got this idea in my head, I don't know how to put this on the page, they can help you. Or if you're like, I'm done with my dissertation, I'm ready to go, but I just want someone to help me with proofreading, they can do that too. So any stage of the writing process. And lastly, our format guide, which we'll look at in just a minute. So some other things, we have format chats. This is basically just like virtual office hours. I just like to give things cute names. So that's why they're called format chats. They're 1 hour long, Tuesdays at 2. You can just tune in and basically y'all just ask me questions. So if you have a formatting thing you've run into, if you've got a snaggle with Microsoft Word and you want to ask me about that, that's what that's for. So we don't do it the week of spring break, but all of these other dates you see here. So the next one is going to be this coming Tuesday. You register for them the same way you registered for this this workshop. So you would go to the graduate school website, sign up there. And as long as you register by 9 a.m. the day of, then you should receive a Microsoft Teams invite. Also, we're having some template workshops. So we had the first one yesterday, I think was pretty successful. And like I said, the recording will be accessible on our website in the coming days, so you can look at it there. We also have 2 in-person ones, and they're going to be at Thomas Cooper Library on these dates and times. You can register on the graduate school website. The in-person one, I think, will be a little bit more interactive than the virtual one, because you'll be at the computer lab and you're all doing it together. This does not include the LaTeX package. I'm still learning that one. I'm in 2 classes on it right now, but if you are running into some weird things with LaTeX, you can call me and we can try to figure it out together. But I don't quite feel skilled enough yet to do a LaTeX workshop, but hopefully in the very near future, we will have that. So contact, this is how you can reach me. You can email me or give me a phone call. I will say this, that as we get closer to the deadlines, I'm going to be getting, and no joke, like over 100 emails a day. So if you send me an email and it's been 2 business days and you have not heard from me, just email me again. It means it just got lost in the shuffle, and I will help you out. Sometimes it's easier just to call though, so don't be bashful. If you just want to ask a quick question on the phone, just give me a call. If I'm here, I will answer. If you get my voicemail, I always check that and I'll call you back. But I know for me personally, sometimes I think phone is just easier just to ask and then we're done. But if you don't like to talk on the phone, that's cool. Email works fine too. So it just depends on what would be good. But yeah, you feel free to always contact me if you have an issue or a question or whatever. My office is in Suite 552 of the Close Hip building. I am not doing in-person help sessions or anything, or like meetings with students because of the plague, but I'm happy, if time allowing, if you really need to have some sort of meeting one-on-one with me, there's always Microsoft Teams. So we have that option, but that's where my office is. And without further ado, we're done. So, okay. All right, I think my camera has frozen, it seems. Oh, good, I'm back. Okay, so someone asked a question, slightly unrelated, but looking at those examples, can the regular text be justified on both sides of margin as against being left justified? Yeah, where you want to have it sort of smooth on both sides. Yes. So that's up to you. That's not required either way. It's just sort of whatever floats your boat, works for you. But if y'all have any questions, please let me know. It's Q&A time, so I'm happy to answer anything. Just need to drink some water first. And feel free to either type a question in the chat if that's how you prefer, or you can always unmute yourself and just ask.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me. Hopefully no one else is trying to talk.
I can hear you.
So I am in the biology department,
Okay.
and I'm going to be using, I'm sorry for the loud noises in the background.
Oh, it's
I'm
fine.
be using 2 different published papers as different chapters.
Yes.
And within those papers, for each of them, there are supplemental figures and tables. So would I then format those as just additional figures or tables, or would that be something that would then switch and go into the appendix? And I would have an appendix for the first published paper and an appendix for the second published paper to add in those supplements.
Yeah, if they're supplemental, so like they would be at the end. I'm guessing they were not like in the article proper, if you will. They were in addition to that.
They were just like the supplemental figure 1, figure 2.
Yeah. Then what you want to do is you would put them in an appendix. So you could have like Appendix A supplemental figures for Chapter 2, and then Appendix B supplemental figures for Chapter 3, or whatever it is you want to do. And then the key, though, is going to be that you would have to number them in the appendix. So it would be like figure A.1 or figure A.2. So you wouldn't have like supplemental figure 2.1, even though it's in Appendix A. You can't do that. Just figure A.1, A.2, whatever. But I see that a lot. A lot of times people will do that with an appendix, and that's really what they're for. So yeah, you could just make the descriptive title of the appendix supplemental figures for chapter, whichever chapter it's in.
Okay. And if you don't mind, I did have another question. Sorry, I
Go
had a
for it. Ask them all, please. That's why we're here.
So with each of our manuscripts, we had, or with each of our publications, we had different acknowledgments or like author contributions. Were there any conflict of interests? You know, all of those sort of statements in the publication. Do I need to then also include those same things in the chapter, or can I leave it just to be like the content itself and not necessarily those additional, like, here's our acknowledgments, we have no conflict of interest, here was our funding?
Yeah, I feel like you don't necessarily need to include that. I've seen students do both. So some people will include that and some people won't. It's probably a good question for your committee just to see if they feel like you need to include like the conflict of interest one. Is only one that might possibly be sort of good to have in there, but no, you don't necessarily need to include your acknowledgments or anything. It's what you do need to do though, if you're doing manuscript style, and this is in the format guide, is you will need to, I can share my screen. So you're gonna need to have a footnote just explaining that. So let's see here. All right, so this is the thesis and dissertation page, and note you would click on submit your thesis or dissertation to go to the ETD admin, but formatting guide, here we go. So, so you want to do manuscript style, so you can always click on this and we can go to chapter cover page. So you can either just have a full-on cover page like this, or you can just be on the first page of it, and you're going to choose one footnote style that's going to best apply to your article status. So if you've already published it, you could use maybe this one, like your name, the other person's name, where it's published, all that good stuff, and then just put reprinted here with permission of the publisher. And then you're going to need to provide some kind of evidence that you have received permission to reprint. And again, that's usually in an appendix. So, yeah.
Okay. And what if, I know I've read through the guide to at least as detailed as I could so far about the, like, you can use if you're doing manuscript style, you can do it as long as you're the first author or co-first author. Mm-hmm. Now, are there any conflicts as far as, so if I'm a co-first author, but maybe not the physical experiments, like I didn't physically do every single experiment in that manuscript, but I am the co-first author because there were some things that were helped. Does that change anything as far as like having to reference in there?
That's a really great question. I hadn't thought of that before. Also comes from being an English major. We don't do experiments, so it's oh goodness. That's a really good question. I would think. Well, this is what we do require, is that you do have to be listed as the first author on the publication, so you can't be the third or the fourth one. You got to be the first author. And if you are in a situation like that where there was some parts of it that someone else did, maybe what would be useful in that scenario is for us to have a memo from maybe your committee or your major professor justifying, like, yes, she is indeed the first author on this thing, on this article. That would be my recommendation for it. But I think if you're the first author, though, then you're the first author.
Okay,
So,
yeah, because I know, because it's me and somebody else that are co-first authors.
Okay.
It's something where, it was started by them, and then I took over the whole rest of it. So there were some things where I'm been, doing that one particular experiment, but had done the rest of the things. And so I didn't know, but being the co-first author, I didn't know if that changed.
No. And I will say this, though, if the other person who's your co-first author is also planning to publish this same article in his or her dissertation, then what we're going to need is some stuff from both committees with both of them showing that we're aware, yes, both students are the first author, they both did all the work, and they're both going to use the article in their document, and we endorse this. So that's something to keep in mind. So we'll just need, again, it's just documentation to make sure that we've got evidence, if you will, that both of you were the co-first authors. So I don't know if the other person has graduated already or any of that stuff, but
yeah, so that would be for me. She was one of our research manager, lab technician, lab manager.
Don't worry about it. But I mean, for all of you who are here in a similar situation, that is something to think about. Yeah. Okay, great. So do you have any more questions, Allison?
I might, but I got to think back to it so somebody else can jump in. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm the same way. I'm notorious for thinking up questions when I'm in the shower, like, oh no, I should have thought of that yesterday. Yeah, so I totally understand. And for all of y'all who are like, my mind is blank, I don't know what to think, I know I just threw a ton of information at you. So if you think of questions later, please feel free to either call me, email me, come to a format chat and be like, I thought of all these things this weekend. That's what it's for. So don't feel bad if you're like, there's something I'm not getting, but I can't articulate it. That's fine. Okay, so Shamika asked a question. Thank you for presentation. Do figure titles go on the bottom of the figure? Yes, so they go underneath the figure. And in fact, if we go back to the format guide, let me share that. Where is it? Okay. First of all, I'm just very proud of this. If you click contents, boom, it takes you back to the table of contents. So yeah, this was more out of me because I hate scrolling through stuff. So that's why when I redid the format guide, I'm like, we are doing it this way. So we go to tables and figures. Again, it's got the stuff we talked about today. So notice table title goes above, but you asked about figures. So figure caption goes underneath. So we got your figure here, and we got the caption underneath it. So I hope that answers it. So yeah, it goes underneath it.
Hi, Laura. I had a question.
Sure.
Yeah, hi. This is Orko from the business school. So here, the session has been really helpful. Thank you for that. But I have a couple of questions. So here is my scenario. I had originally planned on putting 3 essays on my dissertation, and I have 2 essays which are which would in dissertation terminology, it should be those chapters in the overall scheme of things. My committee is okay with having me even 2 essays, but I'm still trying to finish up my 3rd essay. So what I'm worried about at this point is if I put in 2 essays for my format check and, if I'm able to finish the other 3rd essay by, say, early March, can I put it back into my dissertation?
Yes, and here's what I'd recommend you do. So if you want to go ahead, it sounds like you want to go ahead and sort of submit for your format check. Is that correct?
Yes.
This is what I would recommend you do. Have, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, you have sort of like a placeholder page, or just put some of the text that you have so far written, and then just have a big note written there saying, this is not finished yet. And I will know. So I'll just look at the formatting of it, but I'm not going to fiddle with any of the content. And that way we can already go ahead and sort of look at your formatting and get that going. But as I said earlier, with the format check deadline, it does not have to be done. So even if you're still working on that chapter, that's cool. Just make sure you've got the placeholder page. Yeah.
And the possibility is that I might not have it also, right? So the first 2 chapters would be there, but yeah, if I'm not able to, like, there are some studies which we plan to run, even which will go all the way through March. So like if the results again with social sciences and studies, if the results are not good, I may have to, not have that 3rd chapter at all. That's all right too, right? Having the placeholder, but then taking it back.
That's perfectly fine. I see stuff like that a lot. So okay. Yeah. So it's okay. And that's why we have it so early, it's just to sort of get the formatting going. But, right. Life happens, experiments happen.
I think by March, middle, like 21st of March is our dissertation the defense date. So I'll be having a much better idea 1 month, even 1 month later, but not so early in February. So that's why I'm, a little worried. And I had a second quick question based on the, the examples that you showed. So I quite like the idea, since in my essays, I have more than 10, and in one of those, even 17 tables, and then 5 or 6 figures. Okay. Yeah. So I would rather put all those tables and figures at the end of each chapter. So in that case, can we have multiple tables if they fit in fine within the margin limits and everything, multiple tables or multiple figures in a same page, or does each table or figure need to appear in a separate page?
They can be on the same page. What you don't want is to have like 3 of them next to each other on a page. So as long as it's just like consecutive, that's totally fine.
On a portrait page, if it's a small table, say it fits in, and then there's another small table that fits in below it without the tables breaking between pages, it's fine, right?
Perfectly fine.
And at the same time, for some tables, like there would be a lot of white space because the next table wouldn't be fitting in. So there would be a lot of white space below it. So that also cannot be helped, right?
Yeah, and that's okay. That's all right. With the table and figure, if you're doing those all at the end, just as long as it looks tidy, I guess would be my recommendation. And as long as they're in some sort of sensible order. So either the order that every single thing comes in, so whether it's a table or a figure, or if you want to do all the tables first, then all the figures first, that's fine too. Either one's okay. But just, you don't want to just sort of willy-nilly stick them there, like, oh, table 1.17 fits here, and then I'm going to have table 1.2 underneath it. Like, no. But yeah, if you want to have like 2 or 3 tables, like table 1.1, table 1.2, table 1.3 on one page, that's fine. Yeah, just as long as they're, in order, they've got the table titles in the correct place, they match what's in the list of tables. That's what I'm going to be looking at.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you so very much.
You are welcome. You're welcome. All right. Any other questions? These are great, by the way.
Hi, Laura. I actually have a question about representing an electronic survey in an appendix.
Okay.
Would that survey need to be represented how the participants saw it? So, for example, it was disseminated through a Google form. Okay. So, do I need to have that in there like they saw it, or how should it be captured in an appendix?
I think it kind of depends on the data you want to show. So if you want to do it, because I know with Google Forms, they let you also sort of see like pie charts and stuff with each of the answers. If you want to put that in there for people to see the percentage of it, that's fine. But if you want it to be more like, no, these are the questions I asked and that's how it looks.
These are the that's what I'm required to do, is say these are the questions that were presented.
Yeah, I think you could do that in a number of ways. You could make it a table if you wanted to. You could just put them on there, like list them in like 1, what did you feel about XYZ? 2, just list them like that. That's totally fine. Or if you want to do screenshots of the form, any of those are perfectly fine. So you won't have to have any sort of, again, you could just, if you want to make the appendix, like let's say it's Appendix A survey for whatever the survey was about, then you can just write out the questions. That would probably be easiest. That's probably what I would do.
So if I use screenshots, does that font need to match everything else? Because I think the Google survey was a little bit different. Okay.
No. Because if it's a screenshot, that's technically an image, right? So, no.
Okay. Does that need to be cited in any way, or is it just appropriate to say this was a screen, or this was how participants viewed the survey via Google Forms. Is there anything additional I need to say?
I guess if it's like one big picture, I would make it a figure, like figure 8.1 screenshot of survey.
It would be multiple pages, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't worry. Just as long as you've got the appendix title. Yeah, I don't think you need to make figure captions for each individual screenshot.
Okay.
Of the survey. No. So, yeah, I wouldn't. Don't stress over that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I did have a few more. If nobody else has anything else at the moment.
Go for it.
I'm sorry, I found my list or thought of some other things. So this kind of goes, I guess, along with one of my other questions, but if I have a previous published paper, this one was just a review paper though, where I was also co-first author, and I wanted to use parts of that published paper, but not the entire thing. So I maybe wanted to take, paragraphs here and there that applied to more of, what I was working on, just because that review paper encompassed a lot of things that didn't necessarily relate to my dissertation. How would I go about doing that? Like, would I reference myself for, because it is technically my own writing, but it is published in a paper. So
what I would do, you want to put that chapter then in manuscript style, and then what you can say in your footnote, that is previously published material. You could also say contains portions of a previously published article, or something of that ilk, but it's still going to be going along the same route as you would even if it were just if you were doing the whole previously published article. Does that help? So
it would be kind of its own chapter still, but like a manuscript style chapter, or like, I guess so, like some of that information.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm understanding, but
so part of with that review paper, like some of that information I would want to say include in my introduction section, kind of going over the significance of the research and my projects and things along that line.
okay.
Focused a lot on that in that review paper that's published. So if I want to include some of that information, say in that introduction section.
Okay, so you're just citing it, if I understand?
Yeah,
like quoting it?
So like,
okay, I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So would I quote myself or just cite myself because it could be paragraphs, that are from that publication going into the introduction.
Then I would say if it's like you're citing stuff from the introduction, then you would want to put that article in your bibliography at the end. And then when you're citing it, you would cite that, either whether it's with footnotes or parenthetical notation, but just treat it like it's any other article, and you are the author you're citing. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. My second question is so you mentioned that there are format requirements for font sizes, like for tables, but what about if you have a figure, like, a very large figure, but it has, text along the top or along the side, mentioning what each of the boxes are. So the way that we have the figures is as an image. So I can't necessarily control that font size. Is the worry? No,
don't worry about that. Figure, that's different because it's an image. Okay. So figure, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the same font. So if this is a figure you've downloaded, for example, and it has Cambria as the font, but you're typing in Arial, then it's fine. And that's because it's a figure, so it's a fixed image. A table is different because you're typing in that data, you're typing in all that information, so that's why there's a font requirement there. But figures, no. Don't worry about it.
Okay, and then if with doing manuscript style for part of the chapters, but not all of them, like I will have one that's not or like I have two manuscripts that are going in, but then one of the chapters will be unpublished work. With each of the manuscripts, they had their own references and reference numbering, but with the dissertation having a bibliography section, does that mean that I do not include a separate reference section for each of the published papers or manuscripts, and just like they all have to be renumbered to match one bibliography, or can I still keep like their reference numbers in their chapter?
What you can do is with the two manuscript chapters, just keep the reference numbering system sort of insular. So whatever you use there. And then for your bibliography at the end, that will have all of your sources. And I would just do maybe alphabetic order for that one. And so that's also going to have anything that you cite in your introduction or in your non-manuscript chapter. So like in the non-manuscript chapter, don't put references at the end of that. That's what the full bibliography at the end is for. So yeah, so basically you would keep for the manuscript chapters, those references will be just keep that, like I said, sort of insular using that numbering system you have there. That's totally fine. And then at the end of your document with your bibliography, but before the appendices, you would have everything that you cite, including yourself for the introduction.
Okay, and so that it's okay that if the bibliography at the end is, say, alphabetical versus the manuscript ones have their own numbering system, like within those chapters?
Yes, that's fine. The only numbering that you would have to change is if you have some figures or tables in those manuscript chapters and the journal has some requirements. You can't use that for the figures and tables, but no, we don't have any specific requirements for numbering references, so you don't have to worry about that. Just figures and tables, though, you got to adhere to those requirements.
Okay, thank you so much.
You are welcome. You're welcome. So any other questions?
Hello, Laura, I have a question.
Sure.
If there is a requirement for the finger size.
A requirement for what?
For the size of the finger.
For the figure?
Yeah, for the size of the finger.
Oh, size of the figure. I'm sorry, I couldn't understand. Apologize. No, not really. The only requirement there is if it gets too large. So if the figure exceeds the margin requirements, that's when there's an issue. But as long as it fits within the margins, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. So no, there's no set. It just has to fit in the margins. That's probably the only size requirement we have. And same thing with tables.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, and for those of y'all who are still with us, if you want to type a question, that's fine. If you want to just unmute yourself and ask, that's fine too. Does anybody else have a question? I'm going to take that as a no. So if you think of a question later, please feel free to give me a call. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies.
How is the font size, the font size of the thesis?
Well, the font size for all of your paragraphs, so like your actual quote unquote writing, in there, yes. It has to be size 12.
Okay, size 12.
Size 12, yeah. So with whatever font you pick. So if it's Calibri, I know like in Word, that's sort of their standard is Calibri size 11. Just make sure you switch it to 12 if you want to use that one. But it needs to be size 12.
Okay.
Tables, it can be size 10 to 12, and then headings, it can be 12 to 14, but 12 is the magic number. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Does anybody else have a question?
This video is recorded, right?
It is recorded, and yes, I'm going to try to get the graduate school to put this online, so you'll be able to access it again later. Likewise, we have other virtual workshops this semester. We have format chats, so you're welcome to come to that. But yes, we have other. This will be available for you. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And also, after we finish today, I will be emailing you the slides from this morning, and also a link to our survey. And I want to do the best I can, so please feel free to just be honest with me in the survey, and we will go from there. But if no one else has any more questions, I would just say it was a pleasure to meet all of you this morning. And if you run into any snaggles or any problems, just please let me know. It was nice to see you. So you're welcome. You're free to go if you wish.